Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Bring you another interesting video, a chess miniature video. Now, as you know, miniatures normally have to be 25 moves or less, and this one finished on move 26, so just over the limit, but I still think it's very interesting and a game you'll really enjoy. Two heavy hitters, Praggnanandhaa with the white pieces, chess prodigy, 18 years old, one of the best players in India, and clearly a candidate to be world champion one day. With the black pieces, the mentor, the great GM Anand, already 5 times world champion, arguably one of the best players in chess history. Also, I know him personally, and I've always had a very nice experience while talking to him and interviewing him. A really nice guy. One of the best and a fabulous player. So in this game, I want you to pay attention and learn from the opening play of both players and the way Praggnanandhaa handles the middle game with a very interesting and special way of playing. And really, you can learn quite a lot from this game if you really put your mind to it and pay attention. I hope you enjoy. So Praggnanandhaa opened with e4. Vishy played e5, knight to f3, hitting the pawn, knight to c6, and Praggnanandhaa played the Scotch opening, which is not so popular nowadays, but still quite a strong opening. Nowadays, we're mostly seeing Italian games, Ruy Lopez. The Scotch became very popular by Kasparov. He used it quite a bit at some point in his career, and it's still used quite a lot, but every now and then it doesn't come up in every game. So Vishy captured. A bishop to c4 would be the Scotch gambit, which is very popular at club level, but at higher levels we normally see knight takes pawn. Vishy plays queen to f6. Now this is a very interesting line. To understand the move, we have to go back just a step and consider bishop c5, which is one of the most popular lines for black, hitting the knight. And after bishop to e3, black can play queen to f6, which is very interesting. Also, if white captures on c6, then black can go queen to f6 anyway, threatening mate and also hitting the knight. So this is one of the ideas of these queen to f6 and bishop to c5 moves. Playing queen to f6 first, black is trying to sidestep some variations. For example, against bishop to e3, black can obviously play bishop to c5, but he has other moves as well. And there are some other ideas hidden behind queen to f6. One move it doesn't prevent, and which is very strong, is the move knight to e2. And I actually didn't know this move when I did this video, and I checked it and found out it was the best computer move. So obviously Praggnanandhaa very well prepared for the game. The idea is to relocate the knight via f4 onto d5, hitting the queen, and tactically it works because after bishop to c5 threatening mate or nearly mate, black does have knight to f4. Now of course, if black pushes with g5, then the knight drops back to d3, defends f2, hits the bishop, and after bishop to b6, white can just go h4, and already there's some very dangerous threats. Black's queen is not feeling very safe on f6. So knight to e2, a very interesting idea played by Praggnanandhaa. I wouldn't go as far to say that it just refutes this variation of queen to f6, but it does seem to me that black isn't having quite a nice time after knight to e2, so it's actually very strong. Probably the strongest move on the board there. Bishop to c5, knight to f4, d6, knight to c3, and as you can see, as soon as one of the knights drops onto this square, black is already having problems defending the queen, defending c7. So black played knight to e7, which is a correct move to protect the square. Bishop to e2. And up to now, I think that Vishy has played reasonably well. And although I think white is slightly better, it's a game. Anything could happen. Now I think he makes a mistake. Of course, Vichy is a huge player. So when I say he makes a mistake, it might sound a bit conceited from my part because, of course, he's a top player. He doesn't make mistakes. But even a top player every now and then will make a move which he thinks is okay. But probably with hindsight, he'll probably realize that it wasn't the best move in the board. That's why I call it a mistake, not because he makes so many of them. For example, he could have castled here. After castle, white is slightly better, but nothing dangerous is going on. Vichy played bishop to b4. Now, of course, he wants to capture the knight and maybe win a pawn. But this, he should probably know that Praggnanandhaa can just castle, a good move, and just sack the pawn. And if he captures the pawn, then white just has very easy development with rook to b1, bishop to b2, and after knight to h5. It will be very similar to the game. White will have a huge compensation for the pawn. Two bishops and a strong attack. Of course, Vichy knows that, so he doubles the pawn, leaves the pawns weak, and now goes for the castle. So he's just leaving these pawns slightly weak, hoping that later on he can sort of exchange some pieces and maybe in the end game put pressure on the weakened pawns. But of course, the end game is a long way away, and in the middle game, the two bishops, and especially the dark square bishop, as you will all see, will cause havoc on the board. Rook to b1. For example, here, if he captures the pawn, I suspect that Pragg would have played bishop to b2, and possibly knight to h5. Forcing f6 and now queen to d2. Now, computer does give this position as better for white, and I can see that there's a very good compensation. But black's position is still relatively solid, so maybe this would have been the best option for Vichy. He played queen to e5, hitting the pawn on e4, and maybe trying to go for pawn to f5, but I think this is not the best idea. Bishop to d3 protects the pawn, threatening rook to b5 with a swing over of the rook. That would be very strong. So Anand plays a6, and now Pragg plays c4, an excellent move, threatening to play bishop to b2. But first, he does have to resolve the problem with the knight on f4. The bishop does protect the knight. So black strikes with f5, pawn takes pawn, and now possibly the decisive mistake of Vichy Anand. The move that everyone was expecting was bishop takes f5. Capturing the pawn, rook to e1, hitting the queen, queen to f6, maybe rook takes b7, and after the exchange of bishops, we still have a game. White is a pawn up. He does have the advantage, but I wouldn't go as far to say that black has to resign in this position. I mean, there's still a game ahead, no? Sometimes you can defend a position with a pawn down and get to some sort of ending and get a draw. Vichy didn't do this. For some reason, he played queen to f6. I still think he wanted to capture with bishop takes pawn, or maybe with knight takes pawn, to keep the pawn on b7 protected, but he didn't want the rook to attack the queen. Of course, this allows white to play a very aggressive move, which is g4, which is a move we normally don't want to make because we do weaken only slightly our king. But of course, it protects the pawn on f5, and if we are able to hang on to this pawn on f5, both the bishop and the knight won't come into the game. So it's a risky calculation, but I think it's good. Now, to be able to break up that structure, black does have to play g6, but now his own king is also very weakened. And more specifically, the long diagonal could be a huge problem. Now, actually, white played knight to d5 here, which is an excellent move. But the computer suggests an even better move, but very difficult to calculate. Bishop to b2, hitting the queen. Queen to g5, and now the retreat, knight to g2. A really difficult move to find in a real game. The idea is take, and now f4, and the key idea is that after queen takes g4, rook f3 will seal the deal by playing rook to g3. Now, of course, seeing this on the board, both players would agree that this is winning for white. But it's not so easy to see knight to g2 and then to sack the pawn, all of this in advance. Especially when you have another very good move, which is knight to d5, which is the move that Praggnanandhaa played. Take, knight here, and now f4. And this is a very interesting moment, because after the capture on d3, we are going to witness the strength of the opposite coloured bishops in the attack. G takes f8, g5. Now this bishop on c1 will go to b2 and dominate this diagonal, and as the king has been weakened, white will be able to make the battery to go for mating chances. Whereas white's king is also weakened, but black doesn't have a chance to get this bishop into the action. So remember, when you hear the opposite side coloured bishops, if it's an endgame, that normally means the game might end in a draw. Because with only bishops, even if you have a pawn or 2 pawns less, you can get a draw in the endgame. Because the bishops can't control the squares that the other bishop can attack. But in the middle game with queens and rooks, as you'll see in the game, it's very tough to defend these positions with opposite side coloured bishops, because white's bishop won't be able to defend the black squares, as you will see. Queen to g6, bishop to b2, bishop to d7, and queen to c3. It's true that we can't just put our queen here and that's it, because the king will move and the queen will be under attack. But if we're able to get our rook to h6 or double rooks on the e file, then black is just toast. So black played c5, hoping that Pragg would capture and now activate his own bishop, which would be very dangerous. But obviously Pragg doesn't do this, and he goes for rook to f3, threatening rook to h3. Vichy defends well. He plays h5, now that the pawn can't be captured en passant because of the pin. But white forces rook to h3, threatening to take the pawn because there's queen to g7 mate afterwards. So black tries to run, but he captures the pawn at the same. Now, in the game, black played rook to g8 with a very devious trick. If he'd taken the rook, mate was imminent. Now, king to g8 is mate in 1, and king to e8 will also be mate very soon. For example, this would be a good variation to finish off the game. So as I said before, Vichy played rook to g8 with the idea that if Pragg precipitately plays rook to h6, then black will capture the rook, and now it's black who's winning. But of course, Pragg is very good. He plays king to f2, threatening rook to h6 and queen to f6, and Vichy resigned. So, a lovely game, very well played by Praggnanandhaa in the Vadim Rostein WR Chess Masters of London, finished very recently with the victory by Erigaisi. This was a second round game, a good mixture of excellent, tough young players with veteran players and some of the better English players. I thought it was quite a good tournament, very well run, and I brought you this game so you can enjoy a nice attacking game, and above all, opposite side coloured bishops in the attack, how Praggnanandhaa was able to take down his mentor Vichy Anand. Have fun.